And good morning, everybody, and welcome. It is SBN College Football Saturdays. We are so glad you can be here with us. And of course, we always start with our Auburn talk for 20 minutes. And then, of course, we have our video going back to 10 days ago. So, because that was the last time we came here on the air for any kind of college football content. And then, of course, college football wraparound ends the show today. Of course, answers to the questions we'll have here in a minute will be at the end of college football wraparound before I pick the games during college football wraparound. But for right now, we're with Auburn, and we've got Derek with us. So, Derek, how are you?
Good. Always glad to be on the show.
All right. Great to have Derek here with us. So, we're going to go ahead and start with our pick. I mean, our not our picks, but our questions. I misspoke there. Either way. Um, So our first question is, what is Auburn's record against Vandy in football? Derek.
In case you saw the Auburn Vandy game last week, you should know this question. And this is including last week's win over Vandy. Uh, uh,
Yep.
so, uh, so it's no longer what it used to be.
All right. So our second question is, what bowl game did Auburn play on January 1st, 1987? In that game, they beat USC 16-7.
I have no clue what the answer. I totally forgot what answer it was. So
All
I
right.
have nothing to say about it.
Well, let's get into us breaking down last week's Auburn Vanderbilt game. So, Derek, what did you think about Auburn's game against Vanderbilt?
Auburn had a very good start on offense, but their defense started slow. They allowed Vandy to get down the field into field goal range. Luckily, the field goal kicker the kicker missed it. So it was still 0-0. Then they they ran the ball once or threw the ball once, and it was incomplete pass or only a few yard gain. But then they handed off to Jarquez Hunter 2 plays for Auburn all the way down the field for a touchdown. And that was Auburn's longest offensive play of the season right there. A run. And it was like a 67-yard run. A touchdown Auburn. They're back up. They're up 7-0. And then they held Vandy to a 3-and-out the next time. And then Auburn ran the ball again, touchdown on the very next drive, a long bomb run with Jarquez Hunter at 14-0. And then they lacked a little bit. They didn't play like they played in play. So what Auburn has to do is play all 4 quarters. They played good the first half, but then they didn't play as good the second half. But they were able to keep Vandy low in scoring, and that's what they're going to have to do to beat Arkansas in this game this week.
Yeah, I've got some stats from the Auburn Vandy game just to give a little bit of context how the teams did. So, I would say that this is one of the most dominant offensive performances from Auburn this season as far as the stats are concerned.
It is.
So, you look at first downs, you got Auburn had 14, Vandy had 12. Third down efficiency, Auburn was 4 of 15, Vandy was 2 of 14. Fourth down efficiency, Auburn 1 of 1, Vandy 1 of 3. And then total yards. This is where I say I think this was one of the most dominant performances for Auburn on offense because 424 yards for the Auburn Tigers, 266 for Vandy. You look at the passing game, Auburn 194 to 166 of Vanderbilt. Um, Auburn was averaging 7.2 yards per pass to 5.2 yards for Vanderbilt. Both teams threw one interception each. And then you look at the run game. Now, that was dominant as far as stats are concerned for Auburn. They had 230 rushing yards to 100 of Vanderbilt's. That was off of 37 carries for Auburn on the ground. Vandy had 30. And then we look at the penalties. Auburn had 5 for 60. Vandy had 4 for 36. Of course, we already told you about the interceptions being the only turnovers. And then time of possession, that's the only thing I would say Auburn didn't do a great job of, is because Vandy had the ball 33 minutes and 21 seconds. Auburn had it 26 minutes, 39 seconds. So that would be the only thing I would say Auburn. I mean, when you're playing Vanderbilt, they are more of what everybody's viewed as. Okay, this is a cupcake game for anybody in the SEC. This should be the one you should win. And I mean, Vandy's 2-8 this season, so I mean, it does show that Vanderbilt is more of the easier game. But I think for Auburn, there's a lot of positives here. Let me real quickly. I'm gonna get the player stats. So Peyton Thorne, I thought not. I mean, not bad. I mean, 17 to 27 for 194 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. And then you look at the run game. Jarquez Hunter, 19 for 183 and 2 touchdowns. Peyton Thorne ran it 12 times for 40 yards. Damari Alston, 2 for 8 yards. And then Brian Batty, 2 for 3 yards. So, I mean, this is not terrible for Auburn.
I have something to add to it. Auburn, in the first half, they had already doubled their average of scores in the first half, average yards. In the first half, they had already doubled them. It almost doubled them in both categories of rushing and passing. So that's an upside case Auburn can keep this rolling.
It'll be interesting. And now, so that we're just now talking about the Auburn Vandy game. We talked about how Auburn did. Now let's talk about the Arkansas game coming up tonight. It's going to be in Fayetteville. It's going to be a very interesting game. So Derek, I want to get your take. What do you think Auburn's got to do to have success tonight against Arkansas?
I just think they have to have a game where their offense is on all cylinders. And I forgot to tell you that Auburn has made a change in the quarterback string. Uh, Robbie Ashford is no longer the second string quarterback. It's Holden Grenier, the redshirt freshman. We won't be seeing much Robbie Ashford anymore. There won't be that two quarterback mess, and that's a good thing. Payton Thorne has to have a game like last week. All the receivers catching the football. And all that, and then not dropping any passes that should have been caught. I don't care in case it was thrown too hard or a little high. You should have caught it in case it touched your hands and you had both hands on it. And then Auburn's running game, they have to have a real good game in that. They have to be able to move the ball in there because they like to run the ball first down or second down in case they don't throw it. So they have to build. That's what they have to do on the offensive side. On the defensive side, though, they can't have their one interception in like the third or fourth quarter. They have to have 2 or 3 turnovers, and it has to be within the game, like in the first, second, and third quarter. Somewhere in there. It can't be the last quarter trying to rally back behind about 10 or 15 points. So that's another thing they have to and I'll let you see what you have to say about it, Cooper.
Yeah. First of all, were you mentioning that about Robbie Ashford not being the second string quarterback anymore? I think that's a good thing for Auburn because I think that was part of the deal why the offense didn't get clicking is because how can you really get something started if you are, for instance, when you're a receiver and you don't know who your main quarterback who's going to be throwing you the football is. How can you really get anything like? How can you be confident that I know what I'm doing? I know who's my quarterback. I know who's throwing me the football. I don't think that was happening. And now that they've gone to Peyton Thorne, I think that's a good thing because I think the receivers now can be more gelled with who their quarterback is and be like, okay, here we go. Here's the rest of the season. We can be ready to play with Peyton Thorne as our quarterback. I think that's a great thing. The offense, I think, will look better. They played good against Vanderbilt, so um, I think it's going to carry over into this Arkansas game. Defensive wise, I think the big thing here, eliminate KJ Jefferson. From watching Arkansas, that is the way Arkansas plays is through KJ Jefferson. So I think you eliminate his ability to run and his ability to throw the ball good. I feel like you got Arkansas where you want them. Because I don't think they're going to be able to play football where they're going to have the run game play effectively. I just don't see it for Arkansas. So that's what I say for Auburn. You got to have Robbie Ashford. You got to have Peyton Thorne. You got to have Peyton Thorne have a great game, which I think he will. And then you've got to have that Auburn defense completely eliminate KJ Jefferson. You get those two things, then I think if you're an Auburn fan, then you're pretty confident that this game can be an easy win for you.
Yeah, and something to add to that, Auburn has to make it where KJ Jefferson beats you downfield in the passing game. You can't let him get comfortable in the pocket throwing little 10-yard passes. Auburn has to make it where he has to throw the ball deep and try to beat him there, or just make him beat them where it's in the 10 or so yard passes. But Auburn cannot let it get to about second and 15 or third and 15 and let them go and get a first down with no problem. So that's another thing. And Auburn's defense leads the SEC in interceptions, I believe, or is tied for the lead, or something like that in interceptions coming in November.
Okay. And I'll get that stat up for you about does Auburn lead the SEC in I think it's interceptions you said.
Yes.
But while I get that, let's go ahead and start with our game picks. And so here is your records. And like you see, I'm 2 games ahead of Derek with if you look at the loss column, that's where we're going for. Is the loss column is your measuring stick right there. So that is how we're doing this year. So if we were to end today with our game picks, I would win because of the losses. And Colton being on here, he was a guest that 1 week, so that's why we still have his record up. It's just because he was a guest. So looking at this is for November 2nd, so I don't know if this still holds true. But it says Auburn is the top team in the SEC at forcing turnovers and 29th in the nationwide. The Tigers are tops in the conference in forcing both fumbles and interceptions, though nationally they stand out much more for their ability to get interceptions, ranking 14th nationally in that stat. So that was of 9 days ago. So that is just a little bit for you, Derek.
Okay, can you hear me now, Colton Naylor? Because you said that you can't hear me. So please tell me if you can.
All right. We will see if he says anything. But I'm going to go ahead. Well, we're going to go ahead and start the picks. And so we've got 2 games right here. Oh, not 2, but we've got 4 games to pick. I don't know why I said 2. Either way. Our 4 game starts with Florida and LSU. Derek, where are you going?
It's at LSU. At what time is it?
I believe it's a 6:30 on SEC Network.
Okay. Um. Okay. So it's at 6:30 in Baton Rouge. What do you like? How is Florida supposed to beat them? I know Jaden Daniels. Is Jaden Daniels playing?
They said he may.
Case Jaden Daniels plays, it's an easy win for the LSU Tigers, and I'm going with the LSU Tigers in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, I'm gonna go LSU. I don't think it matters whether Daniels plays or not. I just don't have a lot of trust in Florida this season as far as can they beat a good team like LSU. I don't see it happening. I think LSU just easily wins this game. So, um, yeah, I'm gonna go LSU in this game. Plus their backup quarterback, I think it's Garrett Nussmeier is their backup quarterback, I believe. So, um, I gotta go LSU.
Okay.
All right, our next one is Auburn and Arkansas.
So Auburn's got a big game ahead of them. It's going to be a really good game, I believe. In case Auburn can keep it low scoring, it's going to be a really good game because Auburn has to have low scoring games this year. And everybody knows I'm an Auburn fan, and I just have to go with the Auburn Tigers.
Yeah, against Arkansas, I think this is an interesting game, but I'm gonna go Arkansas. I mean, not. I'm gonna go Auburn. I think Auburn. I think they have a little bit of advantage in this game, even though it's on the road. I think they'll beat Arkansas. So I'm gonna go Auburn here.
And let me point something out. This is the first time, I believe, Cooper has picked Auburn this season. Has picked Auburn.
Yeah.
So I want to see Case Cooper, Colton can still hear me, but last time he said he can't, but I made a little adjustment. Please tell me if you can hear me better now.
All right. Tennessee, Missouri is our next one. Derek.
It's in Missouri. Missouri almost beat Georgia last year in Missouri. They beat Kansas State. They almost beat LSU. I'm going with the Volunteers.
Interesting. From what I saw last week, I think Missouri wins this game. I think playing at home against Tennessee, I feel like Tennessee's not quite as good this season as they were last year. I think it's pretty evident here. So I'm going to go Missouri.
Actually, I was just let me change my answer. I'm going Missouri. I can't. I decide that Auburn, that Missouri's just too good at home.
Okay.
I
Um.
just, it's just one of those things that I change my mind on.
Yep. All right. Our last one. You will be picking this, Derek, not me, because I'm going to be broadcasting this one, Ole Miss and Georgia, later tonight. But Derek, Ole Miss or Georgia?
Man, this is a really tough game. There's Lane Kiffin on one side that played for that used to coach at Alabama, used to be assistants with Kirby Smart. So it's a really tough game to pick. But whenever Kirby is going for three national championships, I believe Kirby is going to win at home. So I think Georgia's going to be the winner of this game.
All right. Well, thank you, Derek, for coming on. We will see how our picks end up by next week. And of course, actually, let me rephrase that. No, next week, no SBN College Football Saturdays. I'm going to be at the Auburn game because of 4-H. Want to give a little shout out to 4-H for that. So,
And an excuse to go see Auburn play.
but
Since he's a secret Auburn fan.
I may possibly have some special content. So, you want to stick around. We will see sometime in not next week, but the next week. See what kind of stuff I may have planned for that. So you don't want to miss that. But let's go to commercial break. Thank you, Derek, for coming on, and of course, we are so glad that you could join us. So. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to College Football Wraparound. I'm Cooper Naylor. So glad that you could join me. As what a great night. We're going to be talking about the college football playoff rankings that just was unveiled yesterday. I'm going to go through my poll. I have the same top 4 as the CFP rankings, and that's how I'm going to do it because at this point, the CFP, that's the official rankings. My top 4 will be the same top 4 as what you got from the CFP, although 5 on to 25, I'm going to have a different 5 through 25. That's where I can disagree a little bit. Because, you can't argue with the top 4 that the CFP has put. They've got the 4 best teams. That's how we're going to do it here with my rankings. Then we're going to get into Oklahoma, Kansas. We're going to get into Clemson, NC State, Oregon, Utah, Ohio State, Wisconsin. We're going to have a Q&A in the middle of the show. And then also we're going to announce our Week 10 game. So you want to stay tuned. We got a lot to cover tonight. And so just buckle up as we're going to have a good one. real quickly. There we go. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the CFP rankings. And so here is what the CFP rankings are looking like. Your top four: Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, Florida State. And then you got 5 through 25. So you got Washington, Oregon, Texas, Alabama, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Penn State, Missouri, Louisville, LSU, Notre Dame, Oregon State, Tennessee, Utah, UCLA, USC, Kansas, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Tulane, and Air Force. So, number one, Ohio State. I think honestly, and this is where I agree with them with Ohio State being number one. It's the body of work they have. Because, I mean, you look at their wins. Excuse me. Their wins so far. You've got to win on the road at Notre Dame. You can't take that lightly because it was two undefeated teams. You know, you've got, I believe, 4-0 Notre Dame against 3-0 Ohio State in that game. So you can't take that away from Ohio State. That's a pretty good win going on the road to Notre Dame and having that win. Good win. At home against Penn State, both teams undefeated again. So, so far, I think the body of work of what Ohio State has, plus if you look at if you do the eye test with them, the offense is kind of pedestrian. It's okay. It's not incredible. But I think what gets them the number one ranking when you look at the eye test point of view, the defense. I think the defense has helped them look really good this season. I wouldn't say they're one of the best defenses of college football. They're pretty good. But Ohio State, number one team for sure. I think that's what they were looking at. So that ultimately is why I think Ohio State got number one. Then you look at Georgia. I think when you look at Georgia, the reason why they're number two is I think really the big thing that's separating Ohio State and Georgia right now is the win, like the body of work so far, as far as who have you beat. I feel like that's kind of hindered Georgia a little bit because one, I don't think the competition Georgia's played this season has been to the degree of what Ohio State has had to play so far. So ultimately, I think it's that really separates Ohio State and Georgia right now. But easily once Georgia, I think, once they play some good teams, which I would think, because you've got Tennessee at 17. When you play Tennessee, I mean, this week against Missouri is going to weigh heavily with how Georgia's viewed. I think that's the only two games remaining that Georgia is really, I mean, they've got to win these to really build up their strength of schedule. Because if you look at Georgia, they don't really have that incredible strength of schedule of what Ohio State does. So to be able to possibly get number one, if you're Georgia, you have got to be, you got to be undefeated at the end of the season. So, Michigan, although there are the issues going on right now, they're in Ann Arbor. I think that's kind of hindered them, but also, again, it's the body of work. They really haven't played anybody like Ohio State has had to play so far this season. So that's why they're at number 3. And plus, I think most people, what committee's looking at is who do we like at the moment, who do we think is going to beat who? And they're going, okay, Ohio State, we think Ohio State's going to beat Michigan. We think Georgia would beat Michigan. That's the only two teams we see in the country that we think can beat Michigan. Because I think that's how they're viewing this. Because a lot of times when you look at the first CFP rankings, it's how do we think these teams stack up against each other? And so I think that's where Ohio State, they think, okay, Ohio State right now will beat anybody that they play. Georgia, if they would beat everybody except Ohio State, Michigan, and so on. That's the way I think they view this. Florida State number 4. I think that their win against LSU week 1, it's a good win. Other than that, I don't know if they've really got the incredible win because we thought, well, okay, let me rephrase that. I think Clemson's a big win too, if you think about it, because when they played, it was a big game. And remember, I had it here on the channel. It was a big game because I think that was the big hurdle for Florida State is that they had to get past Clemson. And they did. So that was the big hurdle, Florida State. And so I think now, I mean, if we're looking at it right now, the win doesn't look like much. But if we're all being honest, when the two teams played, that was a big game. And that was a big win for Florida State. So let's not take that win away from Florida State. Now, what we're saying here, with them being number 4 and having 3 teams ahead of them, they basically have, I mean, they'll be in the playoff, but they don't have a chance against these other 3 teams. So that's what we're looking at. So that is the college football playoff rankings. And now we look at my rankings. And here is your 1 through 13 for me. You got Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, Florida State. So I agree. Top four is going to stay the same. You know, with however the college football playoff says, I'm going to stick with that ranking and go from there as far as the top 4. Now, 5 through 25, like I said, I disagree. And that's where I can disagree. So, Oklahoma, Texas, Washington, Alabama, Oregon, Ole Miss, Penn State, Louisville, UCLA. So we've kind of already talked about why Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, and Florida State is in the top 4. So if you look at Oklahoma, why do I have them at 5 and why I've only dropped them 3 places after the loss to Kansas? Well, here's the thing. The loss to Kansas, I think Kansas is a quality team. Plus, you played at Kansas. So, I mean, I'm not going to really say Oklahoma's terrible because, let's be honest, Oklahoma is a good team. Let's look at the circumstances of the game because you had a long weather delay, which does not – when you have a long weather delay and the players are sitting there in the locker room, I think that you cannot sit there and criticize a team because you don't know how the team is actually going to show up after a long time sitting in the locker room. So I'm not going to say Oklahoma's terrible. I think they're the 5th best team in college football right now. And that's another reason, with Texas being at 6, I didn't move them. Because, let's be honest, Oklahoma beat Texas. They got the same record. Both teams are good teams. I think Oklahoma gets the edge here. Head-to-head, I think, is a big thing here. It's like when you're looking at the 7-1 teams, 8-0, head-to-head is going to be big. And so Oklahoma being ahead of Texas, it's solely because of head-to-head. And then you look at Washington at 8-0 being at number 7. I just need to see more from Washington to really make me think that they are like in my top 5 or even if they get moved into the top 4. If they get moved to the top 4, I have to move them as well. That's the way that it's going to be. And so I will say this. You got a big game against USC on the road at USC. I think Washington can get this win because I think USC's not an incredible team this season. I think they've proven to ourselves, proven to everyone that they don't have a defense. And that hurts a team like USC. So it will be interesting to see how Washington, USC, how that game goes. And then you got Alabama at number 8. Again, reason why they're behind Oklahoma and Texas is solely because of head-to-head. Because, I mean, Oklahoma's going to be ahead of Texas because of head-to-head. Texas will be ahead of Alabama because of head-to-head. So that's how we're looking at this. Now, Oregon being behind of Alabama, I think if we're all being honest with ourselves, Oregon is a really good football team. I just want to see them play against someone like I want to see them go up against some powerhouse in the SEC. I'm just being honest. I just want to see it. Right now, this is where I've got it with the top 9. And then Ole Miss at number 10. They're a good football team. You're not going to see Alabama being jumped by Ole Miss because Alabama did beat Ole Miss. So, I mean, let's be honest with that. Pitt at number 11. They just have a lot to work with, I think. And then you got Louisville at 12. This has been an incredible season if you're Louisville. I mean, first year with your new head coach. And I just feel like Louisville is on the right track here. They're 7-1. You don't know what could happen with Louisville, but I mean, they are clearly right now one of the best teams in college football. UCLA at 13. I've just been very impressed with them. And so we're going to see how this ends up for them. And then we go to 14 through 25. I've got LSU, Missouri, Tulane, James Madison, Notre Dame, Oregon State, North Carolina, Tennessee, Utah, USC, Kansas, Air Force. And so that's my rankings as I see it. For LSU, big thing. If they were to beat Alabama, they will jump pretty high, I believe. But, of course, it's going to be in Tuscaloosa. It's going to be interesting to see how that game goes. The Missouri game at Georgia, big game for them as well. We're going to see how they do. So that is just top 25 for me. Like I said, top 4 is going to be the same as the CFP. So you don't have to worry about me, trying to compete with the CFP for who I think the top 4 teams is. Because I think ultimately, when you look at this college football playoff, they always get right. So, all right. Let's now get into our recapping. So let me explain why let's just talk about Oklahoma, Kansas real quick. And so when we look at the stats of the game, and I think, it's going to be interesting to see how this ends up. But these two teams were pretty much even in this game. I mean, let's be honest, they were even. First downs, Kansas 25-19. Third down efficiency, Oklahoma 2 of 10, Kansas 4 of 14. Fourth down efficiency, Oklahoma 1 of 2, Kansas 2 of 3. And then total yards, Kansas 443 to 440 of Oklahoma. Passing yards, Kansas 218 to 171 of Oklahoma. Rushing game, Oklahoma 269 to 225 of Kansas. The penalties, here's a little bit of the disparity in this game. Oklahoma, 11 for 101 yards. And then Kansas, 5 for 55. Turnovers, both teams turned the ball over 3 times in the game. And then time of possession. Kansas won this 31 minutes, 6 seconds to 28 minutes and 54 seconds for Oklahoma. So, I mean, this is a game that, like I said, you had the weather delay, so it pushed the whole game back. I think, and if you were watching this game, this was a back and forth game. And Oklahoma, there at the end, had a legitimate chance to win this game. And Dylan Gabriel, of course, he went to throw the ball just a little too far for his receiver. And so ended up being incomplete. Of course, I would have thought it would have been I think it would have been intercepted, if I'm correct. I have to go back and see that play again. But here's the thing. Oklahoma was a play away from winning this game. this is, and again, like I said earlier, that I think when you factor in that there's a long weather delay, I think anything can happen because ultimately I think anything can happen in college football. Any team can lose on any given day, but the difference here is that it even ramps even farther up when you have a weather delay because you got two scenarios that could happen. The team that's not supposed to win could end up winning, and then you have a no defense in the game, which you kind of had that in this game where there's not a lot of defense. Or you could have a team come out there like the better team just come out there and just smoke the other team because the other team didn't really the delay hurt them, and so you get a shutout in the game. So that is just my assessment. I think Oklahoma had a chance. They just weren't able to capitalize when they needed to. And I'm not going to hold this loss for Oklahoma and say, okay, they definitely have no shot. Because let's be honest, as long as they have that win over Texas, and if they were to, let's say, both teams are 11-1, and then they were to beat Texas again in the Big 12 championship, a 12-1 Oklahoma, if we're all being honest, could potentially make their way to the college football playoff. Because we cannot hold you can't say Oklahoma is worse than Texas when they go head to head twice and Oklahoma beats them twice. Now, it's a totally different story if Texas were to win the Big 12 championship over Oklahoma and then everything flips. Okay. And we're like, okay, they split through the season. Texas, we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt. They're 12-1. Oklahoma's 11-2. So I will say this, though. That's the only scenario. I think that's the only scenario if you were to get to the Big 12 championship and if they were to lose to Texas, where this game, losing to Kansas, really hurts you. Because if we're all being honest here, there is the possibility of if you have Oklahoma go undefeated throughout the whole regular season and then get the Big 12 championship game, Texas were to beat them. I still think there's a possibility that both Oklahoma and Texas could potentially get to the playoff if the committee believes that both teams, they're two of the best teams in the country. So what you would have there would be a situation where you would have Texas at 3 and Oklahoma at 4. That's what you would see. So I don't want to rule Oklahoma out yet. We still have a lot of season left to be played. So we're in November. This is when you're a college football fan, this is when you start thinking, okay, this is the time where we see the best football. Teams are fighting to get to that college football playoff. And you know what? This is the best part of the season right here is November. That's my opinion. Because, in my opinion, Labor Day weekend is probably the best weekend of week of football because you've got games spanning from Thursday all the way to Monday for college football. But then when you really look at it, the whole month of November is stacked with good football games. November is incredible, folks. You don't want to really say anything bad about November. October's right behind November. It's just that those weeks in between Labor Day and the beginning of October, I feel like it's kind of like, not quite as good, but it's still really good football. So when we go back and look at this Oklahoma-Kansas game, we don't need to hold Oklahoma. We can't say Oklahoma's terrible because you know what? Kansas, let's give them credit. I think Kansas is a good football team as well. So that is what I have to say about Oklahoma and Kansas. Now, of course, a lot of things could change over the course of the next few weeks here through November because it always does. Top 4 we got right now most likely won't be the same when it comes the beginning of December and we're looking at who's going to be in the playoffs. So, let's now turn our attention to Clemson and NC State because we all want to know what is wrong with the Clemson Tigers. Well, folks, it's going to be interesting because you know what? Here's the thing. Clemson's 4-4. What is wrong with the Clemson Tigers? Okay. And I mentioned this earlier. Here's the thing. Clemson, Kate Klubnik just is not the guy. But I'm just being honest with you. Or how about this also? Will Shipley got hurt during the game, who is their star running back. Basically, haven't had much of a run game this season. Also, just the passing game's just not there for Clemson. So, when we look, okay, here's what is crazy, folks, okay? When we look at the first down disparity right here, Clemson, 20 first downs. It's not bad. That's pretty good. NC State had 9 first downs. Now you're looking at that and being like, okay, how in the world did Clemson lose this football game? Well, let's get into this. Third down efficiency, Clemson 7-18, NC State 3-13. Clemson 1 of 2 on fourth down conversions. NC State never had to go for it. Total yards, folks. When I say Clemson just finds a way to lose this season, they find ways to lose. Total yards, Clemson 364, NC State 202. Passing yards, Clemson 263, NC State 138. Run game, Clemson 101 yards, 64 for NC State. Penalties, 4 for 45 for Clemson. NC State, 2 for 6. But here is what hurt Clemson throughout the day. Kate Klubnik threw 2 interceptions throughout the ball game. No turnovers for NC State. So here's the thing. What happens if Kate Klubnik does not throw interceptions on those 2 plays? Potentially 14 points. Potentially 31-24 Clemson wins the game on the road. And instead of being an abysmal 4-4, you're not great, but you're 5-3. Better than 4-4. But the reliance on the passing game. They threw the ball 51 times. They had 30 running attempts. So they ran 81 offensive plays, folks. Had to get me some water. But that's the thing is like for Clemson, this is just uncharacteristically bad. And NC State threw the ball 20 times, ran the ball 26 times. So you're looking at 81 plays for Clemson to 46, and you still lose the game. You had the ball 33 minutes, 41 seconds, so 26 minutes and 19 seconds on NC State. It's kind of sad. So, all right. Right now is your opportunity because I'm going to shift gears. And this is your opportunity. If you have any questions, then please let them put them in the chat. I will answer them as soon as I get them. So, I did have one from earlier, from a few minutes ago, that I do want to mention because this one right here by Chris Naylor says, who gets in? So referring to the college football playoff, to be honest, this is kind of a hard one because I don't know if there's really, I don't know how to say this, but if it were me, okay, here we go. So here's a good question here. Who gets in? 12-1 Oklahoma or 12-1 Alabama? Okay. Well, it would have to do with the body of work, I would think. Like, let's look at records. Let's compare teams by records as far as how's their season? Let's look at the wins they had. Let's look at their losses. Let's look at Oklahoma's, wins and losses. And I think when it's all said and done, that Oklahoma, here's the thing. I think if you have 2 wins against a good Texas team or 1 win against Georgia in the SEC championship game, I think probably Oklahoma. Probably Oklahoma would get in ahead of Alabama. If we're saying that, you have 3 undefeated teams and then you need